Hey, good morning, everybody. Hello to my friends and Pega partners from all over the world. Welcome to the Pega Partner Hour, a monthly webinar that provides Pega partners with support in the sales, technical, and industry domains. As always, we'll be recording this session. If you prefer not to be recorded, please feel free to drop from the call, and you're welcome to watch the recording at a later time. Before we get going with today's hyperscaling conversation, which is going to be a great one, by the way, we've got a few coming attractions to remind you about. So right now we have the PegaFest World Tour. I feel like we should make concert t-shirts with it. PegaFest is an event. It provides an opportunity for developers to get together to learn new skills, connect with other developers and advance their Pega vision. If that's you, come out to one of these great events. You can get more information on this at pegafest.com. The next one is October 15th in Charlotte, North Carolina. And coming soon, Infinity 24.2. It's coming. So to learn more about it, you can register for the What's New in Pega Infinity 24.2 webinar on the Pega community portal. That's community.pega.com. This event, this one you'll sign up for, is going to be held on October 30th. And because you're on this call, you can get early access to Infinity 24.2 if you head over to the partner portal at partner.pega.com and sign up for the new release. And while you're there, if you need more information, you can check out the replay of the September 18th Partner Town Hall and hear the 24.2 briefing in case you missed it. And today is the last call for sessions and speakers for Pega World 2025. That's today. So if you have interest in that, please go to pegaworld.com and register by clicking present at PegaWorld. If you want to increase your chances of getting picked, you might want to tell them you watched this episode and I sent you. All right, that's probably not going to help you get picked. But what could help you get picked is being well-versed in cloud migration and hyperscaling with Pega. So to do that, let's jump into today's topic. Please allow me to introduce you to today's co-host. He's going to offer you some value insights into cloud migration and hyperscaling with Pega, with AWS and Google Cloud. We're lucky to pull him from his day job as he's recognized as a Pega expert that helps organizations leverage the full power of Pega and achieve unmatched scalability and efficiency. He's the forefront of driving innovation here at Pega. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my friend, Mr. Kenny Smith.
I don't know how anybody ever lives up to these intros that you create, but I definitely thank you for that. I appreciate the invitation, and this conversation is probably way overdue for how important this topic is for our partners across our sales organizations. But one thing you mentioned, you were talking about the 24.2 release. Just know we're constantly rolling out continued innovation with the Hyperscalers. The 24.2, you will see some additional integration with some of the Gen AI models coming out from both Google and AWS. So make sure you pay attention to that. But as Randy did probably a better intro than I deserve, to introduce myself to everybody that I haven't met yet. So Kenny Smith, I'm based out of Houston, Texas. Been with Pega 3 years yesterday. So we are, really blazing a trail forward with hyperscalers and how we work over the last 3 years in really getting us to this point. And I think that's an important part to kind of take a look back and acknowledge. So when I started 3 years ago, our partnership was really focused on hyperscalers as a technology partner. How do we leverage the infrastructure side of this partnership as we are launching Pega Cloud out to the clients? In the last couple of years, we've really spent a lot of time trying to pivot and realize that hyperscalers can help not only Pega sales, but Pega partners look at how we collaborate, how we solve problems for our clients completely differently. And so I thought that was probably a good place to start with you guys for today. And that is with what are we doing internally? Because I don't know that we've ever sat down and said, hey, partners, here's how we're talking to our sellers about hyperscalers, so that you have some insight as you're looking at how you move beyond the Pega practice within your own organizations. So let's take just a trip down memory lane and look at how have we been enabling our sales teams directly to work with hyperscalers, and then we'll kind of get into how do we leverage that within the partner community. So first things first, and this is probably the hardest thing we had to do within Pega, and that was convince our sellers that this was not an infrastructure conversation, right? A lot of times we would say, hey, we want to have a conversation with AWS or with Google. And they'd be like, I'm not ready for that. I'm waiting. You know, when we get to the Pega Cloud conversation, we figure out like what makes the most sense. We'll talk then. And I'm like, guys, you don't understand. This is really more of a co-sell motion. So just like you partners are looking at how do I engage with Pega sellers earlier in the sales cycle, we were overcoming a lot of those same barriers. And we finally, I think, kind of gotten over the chasm of that conversation with our sellers. And I think it's going to also help bring in you guys as partners because you're instrumental in all of this. But fundamentally, I think there's two big things we have to pay attention to. The first one is when we look at hyperscalers in our existing portfolio, and how do we help accelerate existing deals in play? Our teams had to realize that hyperscalers, they often will have these massive commits, which means they understand who's who in the zoo, who has money, which parts of the business are spending. And so Pega, aligning ourselves to that greater cloud strategy with our Pega to Pega Cloud move, can help increase visibility. We can lean on other parts of the organization to come in and help define why cloud is important for our Pega practice within clients, so that we don't have to do all of the lifting, heavy lifting. Additionally, they have funding mechanisms. They, better understand the intel of what are the priorities and what's important. And security often becomes a big question. Hey, as we're going Pega to Pega Cloud, we have got to push you through our security validation process. Well, oftentimes with Google and AWS, they've already gone through that process. And so it doesn't eliminate it, but what it does is it helps us speed up because we don't have to do the fundamentals. The second opportunity, and I think this is really why anybody who's talked to me like at any of our events, I think hyperscalers still represent the greatest opportunity for not only our Pega sellers, but for our partners. And that is, how do we identify new business to go after? I mentioned earlier about how they have these massive commits that they put in place. But if you think about it, understanding what are they paying $100 million for? What are they paying $400 million for? That will help us identify where the pain points are within these clients. And so we really had to lean in hard with our sellers, and we're still doing it today. This is not something that's complete. So we're still leaning in, trying to get them to realize this is not a Pega conversation, but rather a client value conversation. What is a client trying to do in all the investments that they're making? And then finally, like marketplace kind of is the overarching component of it. It helps incentivize the cloud sellers. It helps incentivize the customers, and you as partners oftentimes have listings also in these hyperscaler marketplaces, which can be combined with Pega to further create value across all three of our organizations, right? Because if you think about it, and this is a conversation I talk to our sellers about all the time, as the IT organizations have continued to decentralize themselves, that means there's more and more vendors that are trying to gain time, trying to get mind share, and just creating noise for our customers. The more you as partners, us as an ISV, and AWS and Google as hyperscalers can come together with a unified story, that's going to cut through a lot of that noise, rather than you as a partner going directly and saying, hey, I think you should do this. And Pega goes separate saying, I think you should do this. And the hyperscaler all the while is saying, hey, I don't care as long as it lands on my platform, I'm good, right? So the more you will see as we get through this conversation, that's really the opportunity for you guys as partners.
And Kenny, you're talking about the Pega sellers and working with them. And notwithstanding what you just said, how do we keep the partners involved? How do they get involved in that process?
Yeah, and I think it really comes back to also this identifying new business component. As partners, you guys see so much business within clients that you're not even working with Pega on. I'll remove the names for the guilty, but I've talked to partners in the past that have said, "Hey, guys, we work with Pega in about 20 accounts, 20 of our key accounts. We have over 600 key accounts, which means we have 580 that we're not working with Pega, but we're doing a lot of other business." I think being able to help identify and bring value conversations around co-sell really becomes critical for these partners. And I think the hyperscaler conversation is a great jumping off point. It's a great exploration area for us to collectively come together and have those conversations early.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ken. And listen, that's a thing that our team beats a drum on. If you're not working hand in hand with the Pega sellers and the Pega partners, like it's a team. We talk about one Pega, and that's part of it. We all got to be put together to sell in one motion.
Yep. No, it's something that, again, I mentioned earlier, we continue to beat the drum, and Randy's does it. I do it. Everybody in our partner organization does it. You guys as partners are doing it. And that's really hammering home the value that partners bring through the co-sell motion, not just once it gets ready for demos or delivery, right? And that's where we continue to need to lean in together so we can create that value. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Randy. One of the other things that I think we're working with our sellers to do is identify how cloud can help. And I think this translates very well with the partners as well. And that is, we at Pega, we use MEDPIC as our kind of sales methodology. And so what I'm working with our sellers to do is, because both Google and AWS use MEDPIC, some component of the two that they've cobbled together, is let's work through the MEDPIC area and identify where we don't have an answer. Where can we help? Where can we ask the hyperscaler for help? And this has helped us create a little better synergy within our sellers, because it's not simply our seller saying, "Hey, tell me everything you know about the client," and it's not the partner simply saying, "Hey, get me into your deal." It starts the foundation for how we actually build trust between the organizations and bring value, right? So I think there's a lot that we as a partner organization can do. And then, by the way, I'm stealing a lot of this from our partner team and just applying it to the hyperscalers, so that everything is synergistic with how our sales teams are starting to think about the hyperscalers. But yeah, and by the way, this is completely interactive. If you guys have questions along the way, please feel free, drop them in. Randy will politely, make me stop and help address those. So
with that, Kenny, we might address this later, but let's bounce it in. We've got a question that asks, for some clients running on-prem, one reservation to moving to the cloud is a potential license renegotiation.
Yes.
This sometimes keeps them from considering the Pega AWS cloud versus running on their private cloud. How can we address these concerns?
Yes. So I'm going to put a pen in that one, only because I'll touch on it briefly, and then I'll give you kind of an expanded response when I touch on that. But a very valid question we're seeing in a few different accounts today. But I think there's a lot of cool things that we're doing behind the scenes that'll help alleviate that. So put a pin in that. If I don't address it after the next section, remind me.
Pen is in it.
All right, perfect. So coming back to like how we sell better together, and this is where I'm really going to lean in with you guys, the partners. We've segmented our go-to-market sales plays with hyperscalers into 3 buckets. One is migration to Pega Cloud. How do we maximize our clients' investments in cloud technologies? And then accelerating cloud transformation. So this is legacy transformation. This is just moving into cloud. How do we get workloads moving? Because at the center of all of it are you guys, the partners. If you think about it, Pega, we depend on you for delivery of the client experience and then the great results. On the hyperscaler side, they depend on you for delivery of the experience and the great results. So you guys are the common denominator. So it's only time that now that we've got our sellers kind of aligned with what our story is, that we really lean in with you guys and come back and say, hey, you're an important part of this. Let's look at how we do this together. So I mentioned the question was around, hey, as we go through migrations, how do we address the licensing and the contracting side of it? So let me work through this, and I'll touch on that component, because I think there's a little bit of magic going on behind the curtains that everybody will be pretty interested in. So if you haven't seen this, by the way, if you have not seen this slide in the past, I encourage you, reach out to your partner manager, right? I mean, this is critical. I can't tell you how many times my team gets pulled into a conversation around, hey, we've got a partner that's pitching client managed cloud over Pega Cloud, and they don't understand why that's upsetting us. And so if you haven't had our Pega as a service team sit down with your teams and talk through, because there was a time when cloud choice was the #1 go-to, right? Hey, it doesn't matter what cloud you're on, we will support anything you want to do. That's how we were going to market. In the last couple of years, there's been a significant shift, and that shift is putting more and more emphasis on Pega as a service, which might be a new term for some of the people. I don't want to say we're moving away from Pega Cloud, but in just conversation, we're trying to reference more Pega as a service, because a lot of times when we go into clients, they're like, I don't need another cloud. That's going to the back of the list. I've got enough clouds. We're not talking about it, right? And really what we're trying to do is look at how do we modernize the Pega applications themselves, and how do we uplift that? It has nothing to do necessarily with cloud, other than aligning with the cloud strategy. And so, as I mentioned, there's a lot of value in why Pega Cloud and why Pega as a service has become the #1, with cloud choices #2. These 4 reasons are probably the most talked about of what is the value back to the client. Why would a client go cloud, Pega Cloud over cloud choice, Pega as a service, excuse me. I'm still getting used to the change in name myself, as you can tell. The #1 thing that we see is really mitigating risk. How can we, as an organization, ensure our clients are staying current? How are we ensuring that any issues that do come up are resolved within an amazing response time? I mean, we have almost a near zero downtime with Pega as a service. I mean, if you think about that versus what our clients traditionally do, it makes a ton of sense, right? When you think about the cost benefit of, where do I deploy resources? Do I want to deploy them, whether they're partner resources, whether they're Pega resources, whether they're their own resources? Do I want to deploy them to keep the lights on and just keep everything moving, or do we want to do innovation, right? And so how do we really look at maximizing the investment that clients are already making in their Pega estate, and bringing new value back to the organizations, right? I mean, understanding that moving into Pega as a service, the upgrades happen seamlessly, right? I mean, how many partners have clients that are at least 10 years behind on a version, right? And it's because, like, hey, it's not broken, I don't want to fix it. But for us as Pega, and for you as partners, it makes it tough, right? Pega's always pounding on you guys, like, hey, you need to be current. We need you to make sure your skills are on the latest versions. And you're like, yeah, but my client's still running on 7.5, right? And so those are the skills that I need. So we want to make sure that they're able to take advantage of the latest innovations, such as Pega Gen AI and all the other cool stuff that's coming down the pipe, right? So if you haven't sat down with Pega and walked through what this means and why it's important, you should reach out to your partner manager 100%, because we want to make sure we're in alignment with what the sales team's talking to the client about, so that we can come together in the same room and have the exact same conversation. So I think that touches a lot on, like, what is the value, or how are we presenting the value? But one of the things that you guys partners always talk about and always ask about is, hey, that's cool, but I've got a client that's saying, hey, I'm running Pega here. Why shouldn't I just go to my own GCP or AWS or Azure instance versus going to Pega Cloud? Because as everybody knows, there's an increase in cost associated with Pega Cloud and they don't have it budgeted. So how do we justify that, right? And this is an extension of the previous slide, an extension of that conversation with your partner manager. But if you really want to understand what are the value points that Pega is leaning in with clients to better understand why Pega as a service makes a lot of sense, it's obviously infrastructure management is the easiest one, right? Where we're removing that cost from their side and we're taking that on, whether we're talking about infrastructure or people or responsibility, we're taking a lot of that off the table, right? Platform stability, this is how often are we experiencing issues? How quickly can we get them resolved, right? I think we have tremendous stats that help clients understand their Pega applications are going to run a lot smoother on Pega as a service than what they're able to do, especially as you guys have probably taken a look under the covers. As we go into Cloud 3, we're truly a cloud native application. And so now Kafka and Cassandra and Kubernetes are all coming into play, which brings an entirely new level of confusion and investment from clients to better understand how do we run Pega. And then we have to figure out how the Kafka practice within the client, whether they agree with how we suggest to do it. No, we don't want to do it that way. Same thing with Kubernetes, and then it becomes a big battle, right? Additionally, recurring upgrades. I think we can beat this one up all we want, but everybody understands the value of staying current. And then the future enhancements, things like Pega Gen AI. So when clients and partners are saying, hey, why should I move to Pega Cloud? I recognize you're going to tell me risk mitigation, all this cool stuff, but truly, like, how do we get the numbers to make sense? It's in this place, right? Now, Randy, coming back to you and coming back to the question, which was, yeah, this is cool, but it's oftentimes not a technology issue, it's a contractual issue, which is, I completely understand. Every time we go from on-prem into a cloud, we have to put in place a cloud addendum. I think there's a couple of things that come into play with that. One is, obviously, there's risk in moving anything, and so they're very sensitive to that. They want to try to keep case counts and case numbers as much as possible, and we have to build in for a lot of this cost that we're going to build into the system. I think those are fundamentally yes. Everybody can say yes. I truly believe, now this is Kenny, this is not Pega talking, but I truly believe there's a number of other things that are going on behind the scenes. One is the client doesn't know how under or over provisioned they are, and if all of a sudden they move it to Pega Cloud or Pega as a service, is that going to expose a big risk where Pega is going to try to nail them for over usage? Those conversations come into play. Different conversations around language come into play. Just know that our business officers, we've been having gone through now probably 100 of these. We're getting better and closer to being able to streamline this. And I recognize and acknowledge it's not the smoothest, but we're getting there. Now, for the part where I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit, and if anybody says I did this, I'm going to remove it from this presentation. But I think Pega's looking at ways we can get more creative with licensing. Is there some user-based licensing, not user as in user itself, I should say, probably usage-based licensing, similar to how hyperscalers bill for, right? So, hey, you're going to sign up for X amount of cases. Great. Okay, you're now at, and then we'll build a tail that says, okay, you can, for the next 100, 200, 300,000, 500,000 cases, it's going to be X. That's going to free up everybody from this conversation, this negotiation where we say, hey, Pega, how expensive are you? What does it cost to look like? Let's talk to your procurement. We like to sell value-based, right? Which means we want to try to maximize the money. So I think you will start to hear some of the things that we're doing around licensing. That's going to make it a lot easier for you as partners at the same time to not have to lean in with the business officer and say, hey, I've got to figure out how we add another 500,000 cases to this client, and it's going to be painful, right? Where there's already a price, negotiated price term sheet. It says, okay, great, here it is, boom. And we just run with it. So hopefully that helps answer the question. I can't go too far into details on that, but just know it's something we are 1000% like behind, and I wouldn't be surprised if you guys don't hear more about it by the end of the year, right?
Kenny, we've got another question that's similar that came
Yeah.
up here. Is cloud repatriation a concern? Is this something to use as an angle to get on Pega Cloud?
Eh, I don't know that we've gotten there yet. Right? I don't know that that's necessarily been a driver one way or the other. We have a couple of clients who have looked at like how do we like we're not strategic with one or the other, and so we want to move because they got on early. It's not something we're truly entertaining more broadly, but with that stated, there's nothing that keeps a client from running both on-prem as well as in the cloud, Pega as a service. And even clients can have Pega as a service built on AWS, Pega as a service built on GCP. I think the important thing for everyone to realize is when we've built out Pega as a service, we do it for parity. So you're going to get the same experience on AWS as you are on Google. And that's intentional, because what we don't want to do is create a secondary sales cycle where now we've sold the value of Pega and Pega as a service. Now do I go with Google or AWS? We don't want that to be a part of the conversation, right? And so I think when you think about cloud repatriation, I don't know that we've really gotten into that component yet, but great question. And if there's more behind that question, definitely let me know.
Yeah, well, we can hook you guys up if we need further. And then as a follow-up to that earlier question, the definition of a case can also be tricky when subcases are involved.
Yes.
And some of the clients get concerned if subcases are factored in for licensing, and then it forces them maybe to make some different design choices.
Yes. Yes. And we acknowledge we acknowledge that. And we're seeing bad habits getting formed out of that, especially as we're going through this migration conversation with clients of migrating them from on-prem into as a service. We're taking a look at the applications, how they've been built, and we recognize it's not best practices for a lot of those reasons, for licensing reasons. And so that has been taken into account when we look at like this usage-based licensing model that I think will come out and help everybody. So it becomes an option. Sometimes clients prefer the way that things look today. Sometimes they're looking for more innovative ways to work. And so I think the important thing is we are looking at how we become more innovative, not only from a product perspective, but also a licensing perspective.
Right. Thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, no worries. And keep them coming, because I have an idea about what I think is really cool with our partnerships, but it's really more about what you guys find valuable and where you're seeing some of the questions pop up with clients. That's when we can really kind of hone this talk track even more. But I was just mentioning cloud migration which, by the way, there's an entire team that covers Pega as a service, right? That's not part of my team. My team really is focused more on the go-to-market of how do we co-sell better. What are the strategies? What are the innovations that we're looking at doing that are going to make bring additional value to clients? The entire as a service part of our organization has done a lot of work on what is the value prop of why clients should be doing this. One of the things and where we do kind of cross is there's somebody, Dan Bell, on my team, represents the entire partner ecosystem as part of our cloud migration program. And his role and his responsibility is looking at what are the migrations we Pega have put a star next to as priority, and how do we ensure partners are engaging, right, or are engaged in that process, which can be very tricky. And this is probably a topic. It's a little bit off the hyperscaler conversation and more around migrations. But when you think about it, all of the reasons we spoke earlier about why clients are moving to Pega Cloud or why we're trying to get them onto as a service, the innovation, the need to get current, the need to stay current are all major drivers for us. And we recognize if we can't get clients current, we're at risk of being replaced. within these organizations. So it is our number one priority in getting as many clients current and over to cloud as possible. And because of that, we Pega are investing in the migration. For those of you who aren't familiar, we have an entire program built around this where we are going in doing free cloud assessments to help them understand what does the lift look like. We will also come in and do lightweight, migrations for no cost, low no cost migrations. For some partners, they see this as a little bit. They found it like we're infringing kind of on their space, and I would agree with them, but only in the fact that we're not more open about it. We're not having a collaborative conversation, and that's what Dan's job within my team is to ensure we're having the conversation with you guys as partners, because we're not going to ask you to make the same investment we are, right? We're not going to ask you to go migrate this stuff for free. We're not going to ask you to go do your analysis for free. However, bringing you into that conversation is critical, because once we do the analysis and we say, hey, here's what we think it looks like, here's any remediation that needs to take place, the first thing they do is turn around and hand it to you guys, right? Hand it to partners and say, hey, is this real? And if you don't know what we've done or why we've done what we've done, we've now asked you to engage in an entirely new sales cycle or a new cycle with a client that is not in alignment. And now I don't want to say allegiance, but that's probably the best term for it. Your allegiance is the customer, because the customer has asked you to do this. Pega hasn't asked you to do this, right? And so now your allegiance is, okay, let me go validate what Pega, which I wish Pega would have come to me to have this conversation. So we could go in front of the customer together. That's what Dan's part of my organization is really focused on, is how do we ensure we're getting that alignment? Because even once we get through these assessments and the migrations, there's so much for partners to do. If we think about it, like we're doing this with our pre-sales consultants. We're not doing this with PS. Now, there may be conversations with PS around how would we do this, because there's remediation that might need to take place. But really, the value for getting partners involved is, one, so you can sit next to us in that room and validate, yes, we agree with Pega, this is the best path of it. And oh, by the way, let us start to show you what you get once this takes place, right? So now we're setting you guys up for a conversation around value add on modernization, which is where we want to drive.
Yeah, Kenny, I don't want to jump ahead on your topic, nor do I want to bring you down a rabbit hole, but the more you're talking, we're just scratching the surface on this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure where can partners go to learn more and get to the next level of the Pega Cloud story and client migrations? Like, where can they do that?
Yep. So in the Partner Hub, Partner Portal, there's an entire section on migration. I personally find it a little daunting because there's so much information available. I reach out to the partner manager and say, hey, let's sit down. You can reach out to Dan Bell, who's on my team, and say, hey, I'd like to better understand where do we fit? Because what he's doing is he's working through opportunity by opportunity to better understand where partners are engaged. Are we working with the right partners? Where they're not engaged, why? And should they be? Right. And so that's what he's actively working through. So very great question. And I would say work through your partner manager and tell them you want to better understand where you fit in the the migration story. Now, I do have to put an asterisk and caveat. What we're looking at is who's active in those accounts. So as you guys have registered projects within these accounts, that's kind of where we're starting to say, okay, who's most active in these accounts? Who might be most valuable for us in this migration? So another reason why making sure your projects are registered is important. But very, very valid point.
Hey, Kenny, there's a question that came in, and this might go down a rabbit hole. I don't want to throw us off, but the question is, does Pega Cloud 3 transfer to customer the cost benefits that come with auto scaling?
So say that one more time. Do we transfer the cost benefit? Because I think transfer and cost benefit are almost counter. We don't transfer. So we will take on, so if we've got auto scaling that takes place, that's built into our contract, right? That's not something where we say, hey, you guys all of a sudden had a spike last quarter, we're going to charge you for additional infrastructure. that's built into the licensing costs. So we do not transfer that risk.
So the question is, are we transferring to the customer the cost benefits that come from auto scaling?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If we just say like, hey, you have the ability to flex, like if all of a sudden, your Pega applications are built for 20,000 users a day, and all of a sudden you've got a promotion or something going on, it's 500. Yes. So that's one of the values and benefits we offer to clients, that they don't have to even manage auto scaling. We do it automatically, automagically, right?
All right, that sounds great.
Perfect. So, and by the way, if you have questions about this, put them in chat. We can get to them, or I can get you in touch with Dan Bell. I can get you in touch with Raul and that entire team. This doesn't have a whole lot around go-to-market in our team, but I think it's an important part to realize, because we're leaning in with hyperscalers through this entire process, because oftentimes we're tying back into the client's VPC, and they've got like Private Service Connect. So any partners that have experience with Private Service Connect, that's gold, as like for Google, and I think it's Private Link on the AWS side. That's how we're tunneling back end through. And in some situations, we're able to leverage the integrations that are already built within the client's VPCs. So the work your teams, or the work that your cloud practice teams have already done within clients, it just becomes a conversation point for us to continue to expand how you as a partner grow your practice and the value you provide across the organization, which I think is probably a great segue into kind of that second go-to-market strategy, which is how do we maximize the investment our clients are making in cloud technologies, right? Which, if you take a look at it, there's a number of different ways you go down this rabbit hole. But I think what's critical, and this is why working with partners, and why I say like it's about time we've gotten in front of you guys, it's very important that you guys as partners get outside of your Pega COE, and let's get into the cloud practice. Let's get into the transformational practice. Let's better understand, what are they doing with AWS? Are they an Amazon Connect client? Are they, going down the Aurora path, or are they going down, the Redshift path around their data lakes? What are they doing around data? What are they doing around services? Because if you think about it, Pega is an actionable solution, right? These cloud services, they're all Lego blocks, right? They need you guys to put them together to build something bigger than just, like text track. Great, it's great if you have OCR, but like, what do you use it for, right? So you guys start to build that together. And what we do at Pega is we start to build it into the business process, right? And so all of a sudden now, your expertise, hyperscaler cloud services, and Pega's autonomous enterprise and data orchestration become critical in, again, how we come better together in front of the client to solve real-time problems. Couple examples of that. This is probably one of the lower hanging fruits, and I appreciate we do have some partners who have leaned in on this side, which is, if you think about Pega customer service, both Google and AWS have contact center solutions, right? That start from telephony and work their way back to the desktop. Pega has desktop and works our way back to the back office, right? And there's tremendous value we can collectively create by bringing these technologies together. And so we have a couple of partners who have done that. And I would encourage, you guys, just over lunch, and you meet with your cloud practices, better understand what they're trying to do. How are they working with different clients to drive different cloud services? Because if we look at the hyperscalers and what they care most about, yes, the fact that Pega Cloud or Pega as a service is delivered on top of AWS, delivered on top of Google is cool, right? But we could sell it as a black box. We don't we actually take the infrastructure layer and remove it from the conversation. What they really get stoked about is like, how can I go talk about things that are important to me, which are, native hyperscaler services, and how we're leveraging those to create a better solution. And so this is kind of the launch point. You guys as partners, we need your help on, is where do we draw all the correlation? You guys have practices in the cloud, you guys have practices on Pega, and it really makes a lot of sense, rather than the client trying to figure out, how do I put Pega and AWS Connect together. Let's go create a narrative and just go knock down call centers. So, and I would say this is probably the one you're going to get the most of, which is generative AI. I think it pops up every now and then in a lot of different conversations. We Pega have talked a lot about Pega Gen AI, which is developer productivity. So how do we help you guys build better Pega apps, which is really cool. But I would challenge our clients aren't saying, hey, I've got such a backlog of Pega applications that I just can't get them built fast enough. So like that's how I'm looking at Gen AI. I would challenge that they're probably saying, hey, how do I leverage Gen AI across my entire organization globally to drive business value? And so this is just an example. This pulled off of AWS. They have a Bedrock demo that you can see on their site. Helps you decide what you want to wear to a business meeting the next day. I don't know if that's the best use of Gen AI, but hey, it's a use. But what's really cool about this though is everywhere along the way that you have a box or you have an arrow, those are all workflows. That's all business process management. That's all automation. That's data orchestration, right? That is Pega. And then you add in the layer cake, the different layers of reuse that Pega provides for a global rollout. That is the foundation of how companies can do generative AI globally responsibly. How are we ensuring that people in Germany are only accessing an LLM that's in Germany, right? How are we ensuring that somebody in Australia is not leaning into data that's based out of Saudi? There's so much globalization and data protection these days. It's imperative that we have a proper platform that provides the regulatory compliance, which is what we do, right? So any conversation your clients are having about broad rollout of Gen AI, there's no reason Pega should not be in the middle of this. And mind you, I haven't even talked about Blueprint, which is an entirely other part of the conversation, which we'll touch on briefly. But this is just, how are we activating additional cloud services? So it's really cool. Like you guys can sit down and talk with other parts of your business and figure out, how do we grow value across our entire partner, not just their Pega COE. So,
and Kenny,
yeah.
the Gen AI stuff. I mean, that's when it starts to really get fun, right? Now we're not a bunch of people sitting in a dark room tapping a keyboard. It's interesting. It's fun. It's cool, right? Like everybody's talking about it. Have we seen partners really start to take hold of this and start doing it?
Yeah. I think what we've seen a lot of is partners doing pilots, partners doing, hypotheticals. I think we probably have about another 12 or 18 months before, CFOs start to turn spigots off on Gen AI if they don't have something readily to deploy, which again, a lot of their risk is how do I do it responsibly? It's great that we can do that, but is that the right way to do it? Is oftentimes the concerns. And so Gen AI is a tremendous buzzword. And I would tell you, hyperscalers are investing, I would say, 70% of their budgets on this topic, right? So if you ever wanted to go into a client, if you want to figure out like, hey, how can I go create something new? Let's team up with a hyperscaler. Let's team up with Pega, and let's go do a workshop on generative AI. What does that look like? What does it mean, right? How can I actually start using this to build it into production in valuable ways? And those are really cool things that people are willing to invest in.
All right. So when people do that, how do they know they're going in with the right thing? Like, how do they have any idea that they know they're heading in a direction of what good looks like? What does good look like, Kenny?
I think good can look like, depending on the question, good can look like going in with a complete vision. So again, Pega, the hyperscaler, and the partner have to be talking the same language, saying the same words, talking about the same value proposition. That's ultimately what good is going to look like, because I still think these companies are hearing one thing from the hyperscaler. It's like, cool, I can do all this stuff, but I'm not really sure how or why I would do it. And then I don't know how I would roll it out globally across my organization. And so the more that we can sit down together and have that conversation, I think that's what good looks like. What if good is, what are the right use cases? I think that's going to be, client dependent. So again, what I hopefully am presenting you guys is how we're thinking about hyperscalers and ways that we can get involved in the conversation much earlier. So it's not just a demo, it's not just a delivery conversation, but what are the ways we can get out in front of some of these sales opportunities and actually create some of them?
Well, and you know what? I think that goes back to working together, right? Your team, certainly in our team, we can help introduce people to the Google and the AWS sellers and work together. They want to.
Yes. Yeah, and I'll be honest, it's been a little bit of a eye opener when we take a look back and say, hey, where could we do this better? And what we see is we've got all the Pega resources aligned around the client and the hyperscaler, but what we're missing is the partners hyperscaler resources involved at the same time, right? Because oftentimes what we do is we say, okay, I'm gonna, Acme's Pega COE is working with Pega and working with AWS. Where really we also need to get the Acme partner team that is working with whatever with AWS, and then their AWS team involved. So we completely close the circle, right? And that's a big miss on us, and another reason why I say this conversation is probably long overdue.
Right, I agree.
So this is running down the home stretch. There's only a couple of. This is the last topic, really, but I think this is one that's important for everybody on the phone to start thinking about. And this is, how do we help accelerate cloud transformation? This is not just moving stuff from on-prem into cloud, because obviously that you can lift and shift and do anything you want that way. But what we're really looking at is how do we take legacy applications, whether it's mainframe that they lifted and shifted onto the cloud and said, hey, I'm just not, like, there's no value in doing this. It's still costing me the same. Or whether it's the legacy applications that are still on-prem in the mainframe, or just legacy BPM applications that have been built over time. I think this becomes fertile hunting ground for you guys as partners, because oftentimes you see this a lot more than we do. I don't think our sellers go look for this type of stuff. And so as we, Pega as a partner ecosystem organization, as we look to bring back, new logos, as we look to bring back deal registration, I would challenge that this is probably one of the areas you're going to find a lot of additional noise coming out of Pega, as there's tremendous opportunity here. As we look at it, how do we become system of record? I know that's probably something that a lot of partners haven't heard in the past, but it's, we've traditionally always been the verb. We've moved things to where they need to go. We're not Salesforce. We don't need to own the data. So, we just orchestrate it and it's in flight. Once we start getting into legacy transformation, it becomes a different conversation, because the complexity becomes all the interdependencies within those applications. And so how does Pega now become a system of record, which we lean in on partners to, you guys would own that entire opportunity, right? And so I think this is a tremendous area that you guys have an opportunity, and you'll hear more about it for those of you who go to our RKOs. And as we get into 2025, this is going to probably be, the next evolution of Blueprint. Like, where do we see value in Blueprint? And that is, how do we take a legacy application, turn around in a couple of weeks, and provide a working prototype so that we earn the business, right? So no longer are we charging to do a POC. No longer are we trying to say, hey, we think we can do it. We're going and doing it and asking for the right to continue, right? And this is where partners are going to play an amazingly critical role, because the legacy analysis is where you guys thrive. A lot of you guys are partners with Cast. A lot of you guys have your own tool sets. Rhino AI. I know we have Process AI, which does some of this, but there's so many different ways that you can extract data out of legacy systems and better understand them. You guys are critical in that. As we look at how we do the data transformation, you guys are critical in that. We're not a data transformation company, right? And so it becomes vitally important that you guys are thinking more broadly than just, hey, what are the Pega apps that we're trying to modernize? We should be thinking about, what are the non-Pega apps that we should be thinking about? Because for you guys, it's an entirely end-to-end transformational project. And a lot of times, maybe your organizations are already tasked with doing these, right? You've already got a $100 million transformational project, and your teams, whether it's your business transformation team or whether it's your cloud team, are looking at technology saying, okay, all this lightweight stuff, yeah, we can do that pretty easy. That's easy. How do we attack the big ones? I mean, do we just take a bunch of COBOL code and throw it into Chat GPT, or do we do something else? Right? I think that's where you guys in the Pega COE have a very valuable conversation that you can then move over into the business transformation practice and say, hey, let's talk about it. Let's whiteboard, let's workshop this. Hey, if we can come in and do this in a couple of weeks and get something started, does that make sense? Right? So you will start to see the value of Pega in a legacy transformation, probably in a different light than you've seen in the past. But I think for everyone on this call, you're getting a little bit of a preview of maybe where we start wrapping our minds around growth, because we're out of kind of the phase of like, hey, we've got this small bucket of partners and all we want to do is this. We're looking at how do we grow within those existing clients. We're looking at how do we grow to new clients. There's just tremendous opportunity for everybody ahead of us.
You know, Kenny, as you talk about this, the thing that you just said that struck me is going after non-Pega applications, and hearing it said that way. And legacy applications are oftentimes on-prem, and certainly non-Pega applications. It feels new to me. Like it feels like a new conversation. So, I mean, listen, did I miss it, or should our partners know this? Or are we rolling this out new for them?
So this is something that I think has always been an opportunity for our partners to really take hold. We haven't given much direction or guidance on what that looks like. I think that will change. I think we will start to give partners more and more guidance, and we will try to leverage, because let's be honest, Blueprint's changed the way that we look at discovery and how we develop new applications. We're doing it at a much faster clip. We're able to take Blueprint applications that get created, turn them into Pega Infinity applications, leverage Gen AI, and all of a sudden we're seeing the time and cost to build these apps significantly reduced, right? I think which is where the value comes, because let's be honest, legacy transformation is not a new conversation,
right?
And so we are in the process of validating like how much do we reduce costs? How much do we reduce time? What does that look like? What is the opportunity for everybody? So as that comes out, I think you'll start to see more and more tools and resources available to you guys as partners. But at the end of this, like, our system integrators are the hub of this entire conversation, because you guys make it all go around. Hyperscalers, we plug in, Pega plugs in, right? But you guys are at the center of this, and it should be really exciting for everybody that's taking a look outside. And by the way, Randy, and I know you said that the non-Pega is new. I'm not disillusioned to say a lot of Pega apps are also legacy, right? Where they become potential targets for some of this stuff. But ideally, this motion is probably going to be targeted a lot more at non-Pega, where we look at leveraging existing Pega is the migration program we talked about earlier with Dan Bell and Rahul.
Nice. And we have a question that came in when you list the hyperscalers. The question is there reasons why Azure is not listed as a hyperscaler, and what story would we tell our customers with an affinity to Microsoft Azure?
Yeah, so great question, because my team deals with this all the time. The hyperscalers that we've built go-to-market motions around are obviously AWS and Google. The reason for that is because Pega Cloud is delivered on AWS and Google. I don't think we're going to see Azure as a third. To be honest with you, I'm surprised we have two. If you look at most platforms as a service, they pick one and stick to that one, because you have to manage it. You have to support it. Like, adding a second one is like adding an entirely new product in how you support it, and there's costs associated with that. And so when you look at how Azure partners, they really want to see solutions delivered on Azure. Like, so if we had a Pega Cloud or Pega as a service on Azure, then yes, you would see Azure in here. But I just don't think that's the path. However, we do have a number of clients that are driven by, we want to run cloud choice on Azure, which, as I mentioned earlier, we've got Pega Cloud is how we're always going to lead, but that's not to say clients follow our lead, right? They dictate to us, no, we're not doing that. We're going to go Azure. We do have a partnership with Microsoft where we can engage with the Azure sales teams to facilitate a tri-party conversation similar to what we've talked about with AWS and Google. They're just not as often because, again, our teams are really focused on how do we drive the longer term experience for success, which we feel like is delivered on Pega as a service.
Great.
Now, we're running up on time, and gosh, I told Randy we wouldn't even come close to time. So
I asked too many questions. Sorry.
no, I don't think it's you. It's probably me. I just get really stoked when we start talking about the opportunity for partners and hyperscalers together. And that's what gets into this slide here. There's a number of funding mechanisms for both AWS and Google that partners can take part in. The first one I want to highlight the difference between is on AWS. Most partners are probably familiar with MAP, Migration Assistance, the Migration Assistance Program, and then WMP, Workload Migration Program. The fundamental difference between these two is MAP pays out to the partner and the client. The qualification for this is it goes on the client's VPC, right, which would be cloud choice. Workload migration would go into Pega's account, our VPC, which means Pega Cloud. So oftentimes these are at odds with each other. And so one of the things we have tried to do with for partners is within our migration team, they do have access to funding to help offset some of the costs similar to what MAP might provide so that there is no conflict. Right? We recognize MAP funding helps partners with margins and helps bring down costs and all that. We want to help do that, but we want to do it towards Pega Cloud. And so we have tried to offset some of that differencing between MAP and workload migration at AWS. Additionally, we are part of a pilot here in Q4 for marketplace split. So clients can get AWS credits back for working through the marketplace. We do have CPPO within AWS that's possible. I think that we have to have a longer conversation around sourcing and all of that stuff to make sure we're driving a lot of value for the costs associated with it. But marketplace is, you're going to start to see it be a much greater influence in what we're doing. And on the Google side, they have professional service funding, which a lot of you guys are already members of. RAMP, which is similar to workload migration, and MC and MCAP, which is very similar to marketplace spiffs. So the last one I'll reference is the box at the bottom, which is basically 3 in a box. Pega has been a pilot partner for Box. If you go out to their page, we've got quotes. We've been there early. We're always excited to work with partners and AWS in driving new solutions. What I would suggest is reach out to myself or the rest of the team. Say, hey, we got an idea. We want to do something that's client focused, and we're happy to entertain. So with that, I believe it's right at the top of the hour. I recognize everybody has to go, but if anybody needs to contact me, feel free. Here's my contact details.
All right.
So Randy, I will turn it back to you.
As I suggested at the outset, great job. It's information that people need. And Kenny, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to help us all today. It really was a great job. I really appreciate you, my friend.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Like I said, long overdue.
Yeah, we should have had you, and we'll have you again. And now as we reach the end of another Pega Partner Hour, I want to remind you that we're here on the second Friday of every month at 11 a.m. Next month on November 8th, we have a very special surprise guest. So watch your emails for that invite. You are not going to want to miss that special surprise guest. And with that, I wish you all the best. There's a lot of hurricanes. There's a lot of weather. There's a lot of trauma in the world. Let's try to be nice to each other. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode on November 8th of the Pega Partner Hour. Until then, sell and be well. Thank you for joining.